Hey everyone, we've got Commander Legends spoilers. Now they did give us teasers back in August, letting us know about the set and what was kind of the main idea behind it, but now we're in full spoiler season. Started this past Monday, so we're a couple of days behind here. So I'm going to do Monday and Tuesday's cards here in this video, and then we're going to do another video for Wednesday, try and make it somewhat digestible. This one's probably going to go pretty long. There's a lot of good stuff spoiled, so let's just jump right in to Brineland the Moon Kraken, an 8 casting cost, 6/8, a legendary creature, and there's going to be a ton of legendary creatures, and a lot of them are going to have partner. And for those unfamiliar with the partner mechanic, this is going to be interesting because when you have partner, you can have 2 commanders as long as they both have partner on them. So it's a pretty big advantage, especially for limited. I don't know how it's actually going to play out. I am not going to lie. The experience of Companion from Draft was pretty brutal. But everybody's going to have access to it, so we'll see. I think these power levels are going to be much, much higher, given that you actually have access to this card at all time. And in the case of partner, you actually have access to 2 of those cards. So we'll see how this actually plays out in limited, but expect it to be a very, very powerful mechanic. That's just a general statement about partner and, of course, your commander in general. So starting out here, when Brineland the Moon Kraken enters the battlefield, or whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, you can return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this is going to come down and bounce something, and then whenever you play a spell with 6 or more, you're going to bounce as well. Very interesting in that it's going to allow you to potentially get multiple cascade triggers from cascade permanents, so you can bounce your own stuff as something to keep in mind, protect it from removal if you have any type of instant speed, expensive cards. So interesting card. We'll see. With all of this stuff, we've got to consider it kind of along the lines of Commander. Usually I'm more interested in the general applications for tournament play, and those two things are connected because once a card sees a lot of tournament play, at this stage Commander players have kind of reached a level of sophistication where they want to take the strategies that are working in tournaments and adapt it to Commander. A Horizon Scholar, 6 casting cost, 4/4 with flying, enters the battlefield. Scry 2 was solid the first time around in limited and expected to be totally fine here, allowing you to delve past late game ramp that might not be particularly exciting and make sure you just keep drawing that gas. Mnemonic Deluge, 9 casting costs. You exile an instant or sorcery from a graveyard and then copy it 3 times. You can cast the copies without paying their mana costs and exile Mnemonic Deluge. It is quite a powerful effect. That is exactly the type of thing Commander players are going to enjoy casting, usually off of acceleration. So not so much cheating it out, but just building up the resources to cast the card, as contrasted with when you talk about like tournament play in, like, say, Legacy. You're usually figuring out a way to avoid actually paying retail on these cards. So instead of paying 9 mana, maybe you get in an Omniscience off of a Show and Tell, and then you cast this. Now, I wouldn't say that this is actually good enough for tournament play, but that's definitely a difference in the mindsets between those two different, the ways that people engage with those formats. Let's see here. Interpret the signs. Oh. Just trying to move this over. There we go. Looks a little better. Interpret the signs at 6 casting costs. It's a sorcery. Scry 3. Reveal the top card of your library and draw cards equal to the card's converted mana cost. Can draw you a boatload of cards in Commander. And the sorcery speed really the only issue there. But with card drawing that massive, they kind of need to keep it at sorcery speed to avoid it being just end of turn, complete blowout. With no chance of coming back. If your opponent's drawing, 7 cards and then untapping, that's going to be pretty devastating. Confiscate, quality card back in the day, little overcosted, but still for the effect, it is solid. If you're playing like a 4-player pod, I can't imagine that this isn't a powerful threat to not only handle whatever the most dangerous thing is, but then bring it to your side. Enchanted Permanent means that you can also get things other than creatures, which can be relevant and is often significantly better than trying to have kind of narrow removal for things like enchantments and artifacts. Just stealing them may end up being significantly better. Prying Eyes. Now here we've got an instant where you draw 4 and discard 2 for 6. not a super exciting printing. There's opportunity is just draw 4 without the discard, so not loving this one. It's difficult to get excited about cards that are pretty much strictly worse than other cards. So it's 6 mana. We do have just straight up draw 4 available. And for this, I mean, the discarding can potentially be an upside, but I mean, for the most part, draw a card, discard a card. You know, draw 3, discard 3 is not that big a deal. Draw 3, no discard is bannable in pretty much every format outside of Vintage or Old School. We've got Kark the Thumbless. What an awesome throwback. Just huge flavor win here. Kark's Thumbs, a classic card from Mirrodin block. I think actually Mirrodin itself. And just a really fun coin flip card, kind of rigging the odds in your favor. And here we see Kark Thumbless and doing a very similar thing and being a partner. And that is just really fun. It does not look at all playable, but very, very fun. Great flavor and the type of thing that Goblin decks can appreciate. Tezevzat, Doom of Fools. 5 casting costs, 4 loyalty, mythic here. The plus is going to create some Thrall tokens, and the other plus is going to be sacrificing a creature or planeswalker. If you do, draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the permanent was a commander. So this guy's going to allow you to essentially draw a card every turn while ramping up, creating Thralls, sacrificing them. And of course, if you're sacrificing commanders, gets a little spicy. Now, this guy can also be played as your commander, which is pretty powerful for planeswalkers in general, as they're able to come down and use their ability immediately, which is not the case with most creatures. Most creatures have some type of drawback there. Either, you know, they've got an activated ability that you have to wait on, or, you know, this is very, very different. You're going to be able to play this just out of your sideboard to sacrifice another creature. Now, it is another creature, so you're not going to be able to sacrifice him. I think that's actually a really important inclusion, because if you could just cast this guy out of your sideboard whenever you want to draw 3 cards, I mean, that would be brutal. And I don't imagine people would enjoy losing to that. And of course, it's ultimate, as most planeswalkers have, something that'll just straight up win the game. This one's going to be gaining control of all commanders and put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control, just stealing all of the commanders. A very fun, however, commander-only ability, and I like that in this type of set. I like having a bunch of abilities that are really just good for commander compared to potentially messing with the tournament structure where you've got cards that end up being too much for tournament play, or just not particularly... Oh, we already through here. Let's see if we can sort this. There we go. Ran out of images there. So we're back. Vampiric Tutor. What a printing. This card has crested over $100, and now we have some new art versions of it. Just an incredibly good Magic card. Vintage playable and restricted in Vintage. I mean, just so good. And definitely going to see a ton of play. This will get a lot more of them out there. We'll see what it does to the price. I'd imagine it will cool off a bit. Don't be surprised if Vamp Tutor comes back down to be around a $50 card if this print run is large enough. We did see Mana Crypt cool off from being about $200 down to $100. And seems like they're cashing in on that equity. They've got these cards that they can reprint, and they are reprinting them. Sphinx of the Second Sun. 8 casting costs, 6/6, flying, and at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you get an additional beginning phase after the phase. So basically what that's going to do is you're going to get to untap all of your permanents post-combat, which gives them a quasi-vigilance. You're going to draw a card, and if you do have any upkeep triggers, that's also going to be relevant there, getting double duty on those. So really fun, interesting card. Like many fun effects in Commander, this is very pricey in terms of 8 mana, but it comes along with a 6/6 body, and I suspect people will enjoy playing with this one quite a bit. We've got a reprint here from Hour of Devastation, a Mana Leak plus Impulse for 1 more mana. I actually hadn't seen that card before. I was kind of surprised that it existed and sees like no play. It's still an uncommon. I think at common that would be very, very solid in Pauper. Though 3 mana is a lot. I'm going to definitely touch on that for constructed play later. 3 mana is actually a lot of mana for something that doesn't win the game. We've got Nimrus Una's Trickster, 5 casting costs, 1/6 with flash and flying. Again, legendary creature here. Whenever you cast your first spell during each of your opponent's turn, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one into your hand and the other into the graveyard, really improving the quality of your draws. And yeah, I mean, this is not super exciting to me. I think it's good colors in all likelihood. It could definitely be your commander doesn't have the partner mechanic, so we'll see what ends up being kind of the optimal build here for commander decks in sealed or draft. Cyani, Eye of the Storm, flying, forecasting costs 3/2, and when it enters whenever it attacks, scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures with flying, so it can attack and scry. If you've got another partner or some other flying creatures, you're going to be able to do a bunch of scrying, and that seems fine for an uncommon legendary creature. They're going to have to get a bunch of those in there. You are going to need, I guess you're going to have like 2 color deck minimum, and because you always have the option for that colorless guy, so you don't have to delve away from these monocolored commanders. Siren Stormtamer. This card was actually pretty expensive when it was in standard. Flying 1/1 that can sack to counter a spell or ability that targets a creature you control. It's actually a fairly quality Magic card. And what a creature type here. Siren Pirate Wizard. Lisa, Shroud of the Dusk, 5/5 flyer, 4/5. This is legendary, so it's going to be coming out of the command zone. Also has lifelink on there, and whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 2 life. So a spell shock. I had to pause there to think about it. From Exodus, coming back here. Whenever a player plays a spell, they lose 2 life. So it's not damage, it's actually losing life, which is even better for the most part. And this has lifelink tacked on there, and whenever you cast it from the command zone, you pay life extra instead of mana extra. So this one's a really, I think, incredibly solid commander, and I mean, that can just win the game on its own, just like that. I've definitely seen games of commander where this could just take it all by itself. I mean, the lifelink is very, very potent there. This is a fun throwback. Ghost of Ramirez Di Pietro, and so he cannot be blocked by creatures with toughness greater than 3, it looks like. And then, let's see here, whenever he attacks a player, so it's whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you're going to be able to take a card that went to your graveyard this turn and return it to your hand. So that's an interesting card if you're milling. That is an option. Warden of Evos Isle, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flyer. Creatures with flying cost 1 less to cast. The Bird Wizard is totally fine in any type of like flying themed deck, which is not a bad theme to have. Flying is one of the better abilities in the game. It's really 2 abilities. It's both can't be blocked easily and can block things that are tough to block. Never forget that. Flying is actually got that 2 sides, making it in many ways better than unblockable. Seraphic Great Sword. So we've got this angelic piece of equipment giving a creature +2/+2 for 2 for the upfront, and then 4 to equip it. Whenever the equipped creature attacks, the player with the most life or tied for most life create a 4/4 angel token with flying that's tapped and attacking that player. Interesting. I didn't know you could attack yourself. I wonder if there's anything to stop that. So if I'm reading this correctly, when it attacks, whenever a equipped creature attacks the player with the most life. Oh no, I got that backwards. That's the problem with doing these live. So you have to be attacking the person with the most life for that to trigger, not the person with the most life gets the angel. So that is much, much better than it seemed at first blush. Sorry about that. You're going to be attacking the leader at the table, and you're going to be getting a 4/4 angel every time you do it. So eventually, that is going to be worthwhile. Also prevents you from having to own your aggression. Some people really don't like picking somebody and attacking them. They like to have an excuse, which, I mean, that's not how I'm wired, but some people really like to have the, well, I mean, what makes the most sense because of this card. It's nothing personal. Thorn of the Black Rose. This is a really solid card in Pauper. A 1/3 with Death Touch. You become the Monarch and helps you hold on to it, as attacking on the ground is not great against this lady. Able to take down pretty much anything with that Death Touch. And really the only thing you're worrying about there is a bunch of good flyers getting in there and stealing the Monarch from you. Ferixian Triniform. This is going to be a mouthful. Let's see if we can get through it. 9 casting cost, 9/9. When it dies, create 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens. It has an encore of 12. So the encore means we're going to pay 12, exile it from the graveyard, and then for each opponent, create a token copy that attacks the opponent this turn if able. They gain haste and sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. So for 12 mana, you're going to get a bunch of 9/9s to attack everybody, and then when they die, you're going to get a bunch of golems, which is just a game-ending effect. Of course, 12 mana effects should be really, really powerful, and that's going to cause some damage. Now, keep in mind, in Commander, you're starting with 40 life, so getting hit for 9, not nearly as big a deal as it is in, say, Legacy. But that card does some serious work. Mask of the Mimic, I think that's what that's called. No, Memory. So Mask of Memory, we're going to equip for only 1 mana, and then when that creature deals damage, they're going to draw dose cards and then discard a card. So a really solid thing to toss around onto your creatures that are actually going to be getting in there. Be able to draw 2, discard a card. Very powerful when you're discarding excess lands or anything with synergy. And that card is very real and totally playable in Limited. Mindless Automaton. From way back in Exodus, we're getting a reprint here. Nothing too special there. Fits in the +1/+1 counter theme. Xenagos, God of Revels, 3, a red and a green for a 6/5 indestructible. And I found that new players really have an interesting relationship with the gods in MTG. They see indestructible and they feel completely overwhelmed by it. They feel like it's unbeatable. And then over time, they start to understand that, like, okay, well, we can answer this card with things like bounce or things that exile it. And then the next step after that is figuring out that, the best way to answer stuff is to just kill your opponent, which is, I think, probably the best place to land for people if they're going to be playing in tournaments. Instead of trying to answer permanents, just KO the player, and then that's usually the best answer. Historically, it has been. Certainly in Vintage, that was always the best answer, was to just combo off and kill your opponent. But this card does a lot of heavy lifting. Of course, the 6/5 body, indestructible, and it's going to actually be able to attack and block if you have Devotion 7, which is not that much to ask because you've already got 2 right in this casting cost. Remember, this counts toward your Devotion. But this sees play in a lot of decks because at the beginning of combat on your turn, a creature you control gains haste and +X/+X, where X is the creature's power. Very often paired with Emrakul in Constructed Magic, giving him an additional bonus, and that haste, which is so essential to making him a game-ending threat. The Annihilator 6 going off is crucial. Otherwise, it's way too easy for your opponent to use those permanents to answer it, whether it's Planeswalkers, bouncing, or Okoing, or Elking, whatever, your Emrakul, or just using their mana to cast some type of removal. You generally want to give your best things haste, and this card's very, very dangerous because of that. Maelstrom Colossus. What a fun card here. 8 mana for a 7/7 with Cascade, so he's going to be already totally fine for a 7/7 body. I mean, a little expensive, to be fair, but like still in Limited, there's much worse things than just colorless bombs. Very often colorless cards will have difficult mana requirements. This is as easy as it gets, and that Cascade could be anything, including a very difficult to cast card. So this one's very, very interesting, and I wouldn't actually be embarrassed to sleeve this up in a slow pod, just really getting a lot of value out of your plays. Briarblade Adept, 4 and a black for a 3/4 whenever it attacks. Target creature and opponent controls get -1/-1, making it very difficult for utility creatures to stick around. And then that Encore really, really makes a mess of things, as we established, getting all of those attack steps. So Encore synergizes with all of those creatures attacking and then also them all dying. And of course, if you have ways of getting rid of those bodies, I mean, that is very, very powerful. I don't know what's going to be in this set, but certainly things like Altar of Dementia or any type of sack outlets can make great use of all of those extra bodies. Blade Griff Prototype, 5 casting costs, 3/2 flyer, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you destroy target non-land permanent of that player's choice that one of your opponents controls. So in 2-player games, this is going to attack, and they're going to have to sacrifice or destroy one of their own permanents. In a multiplayer game, at least they get to point at somebody else, and you get to piss off more than one person at a time. Rebic, Architect of Ascension. We've got a whole bunch of stuff surrounding Serra and the Angels in this set, which I think is going to be a big plus for a lot of Commander players. Very popular with so many Commander players. And for 3 and a white, we've got a 3/4 with a partner mechanic, so you can actually have this alongside your other commander in the command zone at the start of the game. But artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost among artifacts you control. So your signets are not going to be able to be abrupt decayed when this is out. If you have a 0, a 1, and a 2, then they've got protection from 1, 2, 0, 1, and 2 casting costs. And just really interesting that this just does a lot of work for artifact decks. Just really, really strong. This Human Artificer, and it's going to enable just the... Like, think about all of your mana costs with all of your artifact creatures and how out of hand that can get, where you've got like a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4 on board. I mean, really the only downside here is Rebic is something that you can actually handle because it doesn't give protection to itself. So that's just really interesting. Really, like, turning all your stuff into, you know, quasi true name nemesises. Because remember, if they have a 3 casting cost creature and you have protection from 3 casting costs, they can't block it either. So really fun, interesting Magic card. And I guess it wasn't correct to mention the Angels there. That kind of had like an Angel theme. I don't know if that Artificer lives in Serra's realm or it was just kind of a similar art style. So we got Vile Smasher. This guy's back. A lot of those Commander, I think 2016 cards coming back, and I think you can expect a big decrease in a lot of the values on these. Definitely going to feel a little bad for me as a store to have a decent selection of Commander 2016, including cards like Vile Smasher, that are likely going to drop significantly in value. We'll see the size of the print run. Hopefully that is offset by the amount of Commander boxes and product that we sell. That is kind of the upside for stores, is when the values are diluted. Even though their inventory goes down, they do have the opportunity to sell product. I feel much worse for the people that are like just really dedicated collectors, where, you know, maybe you actually have all of the Commander 2016 decks and, you know, you've been playing with them and now you're going to see a significant decrease in the value. Like there's like a $50 Merfolk and stuff in those decks, and I suspect that'll end up getting reprinted. Marble Diamond, huge printing. And again, this is actually going to be a pretty significant financial printing, as those diamonds have crept up significantly in price over the last few years as Commander's taken off, and now they're going to be available at common. And the diamond cycle, I'm sorry, the what is it? Sapphire Diamond? So there's the Sapphire Diamond, I think it's like Charcoal Diamond, there's a bunch of them, and couldn't be Emerald Diamond. I'm not remembering what the green one is, but anyways, these are actually very, very solid for Commander, and they're not as good as the Signets, but like especially for monocolor decks, people need them. So very similar to the medallions that came out. They just end up being incredibly good, particularly in monocolored decks, and they're just a welcome addition. Coming into play tapped is a problem, but you know what? It's practically a Mox in Commander, and it's slower, but it's still exactly the type of effect you want, because you always have the ability to play things from the command zone, which makes ramp just that much more important. Raise the Alarm, returning again, creating 2 1/1 white soldier tokens at instant speed. There's been times where this can be good. For the most part, it's pretty underwhelming, but there are certainly a lot of synergies that can go along with the 2 bodies entering the battlefield and the bodies being able to pick stuff up, equipment, enchantments, anything along those lines. Radiant Serra Archangel, 7 casting costs, 6/4, a legendary flying angel token, and you can tap another untapped creature you control with flying to give radiant protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. That is going to be very difficult to deal with. Kind of a fun flavor there. It kind of feels like those creatures are like worshiping or, bowing in adoration, bowing in respect, and that's giving Serra that divinity. And just really fun flavor. We'll see what type of different art they have for this card at uncommon. I think that's going to be probably playable, a little expensive. We'll see if the decks end up being good. That's really the question. My guess is this is going to basically be like a standoff situation where people just start piling up resources, and then it's going to be just throwing nukes at each other. That's kind of the general vibe for Commander, is just really throwing some heavy hands once you've kind of got that feeling out process done and everybody's got some resources. Acidic Slime, card that is got a lot of power to it at 5 mana, the 2/2 Death Touch, and it's also going to take out a artifact or enchantment. This one, I'm not sure the name of it, but we've got a 5 casting cost, 3/7. It does have Partner, and whenever a creature enters, I think this is the one that it was when it enters the battlefield under your control, you're going to gain life equal to their toughness, I think. Let me check on that. So not enter the battlefield, actually when they deal combat damage. So kind of a interesting lifelink style effect. Opposition Agent, this is probably the card that's getting the most attention. So at 2 and a black for a 3/2 with flash, and you control your opponent's library. You control your opponents while they're searching their library. And it also says while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card that they find, and you can play those cards for as long as they remain exile, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So this is very similar, I would argue, to a Blood Sun or Blood Moon-ish effect. So it's going to stop fetch lands, which is going to be the biggest thing by far. It's going to actually actively stop those from working. Now, if this comes down on the first turn, that's going to be potentially a real significant issue. My gut is this card's just going to get answered. I think this is very similar to Aven Mind Sensor. And initially, I'm pretty sure people are losing their minds over this card. I don't know. People like to talk about cards. They do. I have, over the years, had a few people that I've actually tried to engage with to try and set up some stakes for them, running their mouth about how good new cards are going to be. It's not going to earn you any friends. I'm not going to lie. You kind of just need to let people have it, and just don't get caught up in the hype yourself. But people just really enjoy getting swept away with these best case scenarios and overestimating things. Now, if it ventures into the territory of them really being crappy about it and thinking that Magic is dead, or potentially freaking out and selling cards, there may or may not be anything you can do about that. you can't really be fighting other people's battles for them. But I don't think this card is going to be nearly as big a deal as people think. It basically comes down and says you can't use fetch lands until you kill this creature. And occasionally you're going to get people. Occasionally they're going to crack a fetch land. You're going to jam this, and it's going to be a total blowout. But I mean, Stifle is also very often in those situations a blowout at way less mana. So I don't know. I think it's not nearly as good as people are thinking. Maybe I'm going to be wrong. Maybe it's going to be absolutely brutal, but my gut feeling is you can just actually kill this creature. It's just a 3/2. It dies to literally everything outside of, say Baleful Strix and Icefang Coatl. Like they're not gonna swing into you with this creature in all likelihood. So you're gonna need some actual removal, either an Oko or a Bolt. Fatal Push will also work as long as you're not relying on the fetch land you sacked to actually come down. And yeah, it's a cool printing. I really, really like the printing. I think it's going to be an interesting tool. Ultimately, it's probably going to be very similar to Aven Mindcensor and Notion Thief in terms of its play. Magus of Order, a forecasting cost, 3/3, with a natural order tacked onto it. You pay a green, tap it, sacrifice this and another green creature to go get a green creature out of your library and put it into the battlefield. So like a poor man's natural order, so to speak, or just an additional one for commander. You can probably never have too much of that effect. This elf card here is a 4/4 for 5 from the original Conspiracy, becoming the Monarch, and nothing really added to the format there. Kodama of the East Tree. Very interesting card here. A 6/6, and whenever a permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a permanent from your hand into the battlefield with converted mana cost less than that, as long as the other permanent didn't enter because of this ability. So that's pretty interesting for commander. I mean, the 6 casting cost 6/6, much more where I would rather be in terms of stat lines. There's been some really unimpressive stat lines on some of these creatures, and this is a little bit more exciting to me to be able to have a card that can actually function even if things go sideways. Some of these commander games may be just brutal wars of attrition where those commanders in the end are the only things left standing, and whoever has the larger commanders may find themselves in very good shape. Keskit the Flesh Sculptor, a 3 casting cost, 1/3. Again, legendary here, and you sacrifice 3 other artifacts or creatures to look at the top 3 of your library. Put 2 into your hand and the other into your graveyard. That is a lot to ask in terms of the sacrifice. It'll really depend on the quality of artifacts that you're sacrificing. I can definitely see people actually enjoying this for constructed commander. Drawing cards. I mean, there's certainly way more broken things you can do. But, there's some interesting elements there. I'm sure you could definitely assemble some contraptions where you're sacrificing artifacts and then the artifacts are returning and things are untapping and you just got like this crazy contraption assembled. He could fit into some of those creations. Sandstone Oracle, 7 casting cost, 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you choose an opponent, and if that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. That's an interesting effect. A little expensive, but I mean, if you're hellbent and you're at a decent sized table and you've got somebody that's in the lead, I mean, that is a very, very potent effect in a 4/4 body to boot. Profane Transfusion, 9 casting cost sorcery here. 2 players exchange life totals, and then you create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token, where X is the difference between those 2 players' life totals. I mean, right off the bat, that is pretty fun with Platinum Angel. Like, if you're at 0 life, to go ahead and just KO somebody with this card is pretty intense. And then, of course, getting a giant creature out of it. Again, most of these cards that are really cool effects are outrageously priced at 9 mana. Now, that is quite a lot of mana. Charcoal Diamond, we mentioned that earlier. The Diamond cycle coming to the common slot, so available for Pauper and also just available for people without needing to spend as much money. Exquisite Huntmaster, a new elf here, forecasting cost 4/2. When it dies, you create a 1/1 green elf warrior, and that's going to do a lot of work from the graveyard. I mean, just sending at everybody and leaving a bunch of 1/1 elf tokens in its wake, definitely much better for multiplayer, which is, I think, what they should be going for here. Eyeblight Colors, another common, 4 and a black for a 3/3 this time, and when this one dies, you get 3 green elf warrior tokens, and then you mill 3. And I think in general, mill tends to be better when you're targeting yourself and you've got synergy in your deck. Milling on your opponent, unless you actually kill them with the mill, is generally actually helping them. Like, there's a lot of decks that can actually use their graveyard as a resource. So that's something that I think casual players are slowly learning, is that just milling somebody randomly for, like, say 10 cards does not help you. Really doesn't. Like, it helps them, if anything, but it doesn't actually help you. Prophetic Prism, that's a quality artifact to be sacrificing. This thing sees a lot of play in Pauper, allowing you to filter mana into whatever color you need, and also being an artifact that replaces itself, so it sees play in a variety of strategies, things like Atog, actually sacrificing it to get bigger and just combo off and end the turn, in the game, and then also in Tron decks, taking the massive amounts of colorless mana and filtering to whatever it is they need easily. Of course, being colorless to begin with is very nice. And we've got Sidir Kondo of Jamora. Let's see here. He is partner, and I'm going to get the translation. All right, this one's a mouthful. It does have flanking, which stacks, by the way. Whenever a creature without flanking blocks, the blocking creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn. So you can actually have multiple instances of flanking, making your creatures a nightmare to block. And then also, creatures your opponent control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less. So an awful lot of words on there. They don't seem super relevant in general, but that is a card that's been worth a little bit because of that short printing in Commander 2016. We'll see a lot more of them entering the population. Nekosar, he is back as well. Nekosar, a pretty popular competitive commander. I think they actually did a Judge promo printing of this guy. And he is a 2/4 for 5. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. And whenever an opponent draws a card, he does 1 damage to that player. So kind of like a spiky group hug element to him, which I've seen in a lot of people's more competitive commander decks. We've got Queen Marchesa, forecasting costs 3/3. I feel like they've been printing her a bunch lately. I've seen a lot of this card recently. Death Touch, haste, and you become the monarch when she ETBs. Also, at the beginning of your upkeep, and if an opponent is the monarch, you create a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Death Touch and haste. So not really worth the trade-off. You don't want your opponents being the monarch. It is a really dangerous thing to introduce into the board state, and it certainly makes you a target. If you can hold on to it, you're going to do great. But I feel like the monarch, in comparison to 1v1 games, it is super, super suspect to attempt to make that work in a multiplayer game. You're painting a big target on your back. In 1v1, there's only one way they can be attacking. And in 4-player games, I'm not actually sure it's a particularly strong strategy. There's a real cost there. So we've got Averna, Soul of Chaos, probably what this is called. And this one's fun, as when you cascade, you can put a land card exiled onto the battlefield. Just one, not all the lands, thank goodness. That would be completely ridiculous. But, getting a land out of this makes this a really solid legendary creature. We got 3 colors coming down on turn 3, and this could be one of the stronger commanders that you could hope for in this limited format. And I think also going to be something that people play with just in general in Commander. It does not have partner, so you're getting stuck with just the one creature, but could be fine. We've got a counter spell here with Cascade, 3 and 2 blue to counter a spell and Cascade that high casting cost isn't necessarily the worst thing when you have a cascade tacked onto it. And in general, in my experience, counterspells are often going to be used to save the table. A lot of the time, that'll buy you some table cred, where if you're actually stopping somebody from winning, then you're not necessarily the next target yourself. If you can politically play it that way, you can prevent everybody from dying and then kind of build your resources until you're actually ready to win, and not just turn around and be the next person to go after. Aurora Phoenix, a 6 casting cost, 5/3 flyer with Cascade, and then also whenever you Cascade, you're getting this back. This actually is whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, you return it from your graveyard to your hand. So seems fine. I mean, it's definitely no Arclight Phoenix. Could be oppressive if they worded it differently, but the way it is, it seems totally reasonable Magic card. We have up next 4 casting costs, 4/2, and kind of like no idea what this one's going to be called. Something, I guess, Glutraughter Captain. And when it enters the battlefield, you're going to become the Monarch, and whenever an opponent attacks you with 1 or more creatures, when you're the Monarch, then he deals damage to that equal to the number of cards in their hand. So if they have a full grip and they attack you and you're the Monarch, they're going to be taking 7 damage. A little bit of a discouraging factor, but not enough to prevent people from attacking you. If you're the Monarch, you're just painting a target on your back. And of course, then they're putting a target on there. It's kind of like Goblin King. Like, you're just really setting up a cycle of bloodshed by introducing the Monarch to the board state. Very chaotic. We've got Silas Wren's Secret Adept is a working title for this one. The legendary artifact creature human. So he's a creature and an artifact. And Death Touch tacked onto this robot body. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact card in your graveyard, and you can cast that card this turn. That guy is going to see a lot of play given that he's got Partner. I think that's very, very powerful with cards like Nile Spellbomb, Executioner's Capsule. Like, there's so many things that you could be bringing back with this guy, and I suspect that people will. Maelstrom Wanderer. Well, that card's getting printed again, so expect the value to tick down some more. We'll see how big the print run is on this set. Like I said, I expect it to be pretty significant printing. I don't know if this is going to be more along the lines of a Double Masters or Jumpstart was just poorly executed. They just haven't managed to get the product to the shelves. I'm imagining this is going to be somewhere in the Modern Horizons kind of print run, but that's just total speculation. I don't have any clarity on that, but that's what my gut tells me about this, is they're going to want to milk this cash cow, and I suspect that it'll sell incredibly well. I think it'll get packed out very well, where people just like pick up loose boosters and just enjoy opening them, looking to get something exciting, never really knowing what they're going to get next. And Commander players just love that. Tournament players, it's basically incorrect for tournament players to buy packs, and a lot of people in a position to speak to players will basically tell them like, oh, you should never be buying packs unless you're, drafting or playing sealed, which is kind of true to a degree. You're not really giving people very much agency there, but the reality is casual players do enjoy opening product and then building with what they find. Like, they don't have to play some optimal deck according to a list on the internet. And I've really enjoyed my time here at the store, meeting so many new casual players and just being able to be a part of their genuine love for the game. I think there's just a little bit of a disconnect with some people that are trying to explain how they think Magic should be played. And I just think it's probably incorrect to look at it that way. Magic can be played any number of ways, and Commander is a perfect example of that. Here's this format that emerged organically from people wanting to have a different experience. So if people want to open packs and actually find something and play with just that instead of specifically getting the singles, that's on them. Like, that is a fun way for them. It's not what I do, But, I mean, I can't be ascribing how I live to everybody. That'd be insane. Breach's Brazen Plunderer. A little bit of an aside there. We got another legendary creature. This one's a Goblin Pirate. We've got some serious mutton chops on this guy, too. He's got Menace, 3/3 body, and whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to an opponent, exile the top card of each of those opponents' libraries. You can play those cards this turn, and you may spend mana of any color in order to play those. So, wow. I mean, that's some power, and he's going to do some plundering. That one's probably a strong candidate for one of the partners for limited there. Just getting extra lands off of that. I mean, that's going to be like your land drop and probably at least one other spell. So that is spicy. Coastline Marauders, 3 casting costs, 0/3. We're not off to a good start. This is the first time I'm seeing all of these cards, so let's delve in a little more. When it attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each land the defending player controls. Well, that took a quick turn. So we have a 0/3 trample, but actually probably going to be, I don't know, most games 5, 6, 7 power. And then that Encore, being able to get a whole ton of these guys back. I mean, I still think it's rubbish. Just the fact that it's an 0/3, unless it's attacking, is very underwhelming for 3 mana investment. But, I mean, I could definitely see people having fun with it in Commander. It'll really depend on what you can do with those Encore bodies. And kind of the more people that there are in the game, potentially the more bonus you can get by getting that Encore. You know, the big difference between getting 3 extra guys or, 4 or 5 extra guys for the turn if you've got some way of utilizing those bodies. We've got Brazen Freebooter. When it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Just a kind of solid-ish card here. 4 mana, 3/3, but you get a treasure, which can basically call this like a 3 mana, 3/3, which is fine. So, I mean, they can't all be home run exciting cards. Some of them just got to get work done. Talk about exciting cards. 3 visits is exciting for reasons that might not be obvious to you if you're not familiar with the original Portal 3 Kingdoms printing. This is just 1 and a green to search your library for a forest, put it into the battlefield, and shuffle your library. Now, that can get any forest. So you're talking about Savannah, Taiga, Tropical Island, and Bayou. Of course, the Shocklands as well. Anything that has forest. It doesn't have to be a basic forest. So this is like I want to say $120 card, something like that, from Portal 3 Kingdoms. I am going to be paying very close attention. Well, actually, that's not true. I'll study after the fact. I'm not going to keep too much of an eye on it. The original P3K printing versus this. What happens? How much does this end up being worth? I'm guessing this probably ends up being like a $3 card or something. It's an uncommon. It's probably somewhat similar to Cultivate in that regard. However, this is going to be the only printing instead of all of the different printing, so it's going to be tough. It's very difficult to gauge how much this card's going to be worth. And I'm going to be very interested to know what happens to that original $100+ price tag on the Portal versions. I suspect, if I had to guess, that the English one's probably going to do the best out of all of them. And the Asian versions of the P3K version are probably set to do the worst in this situation. I suspect that those will probably take a pretty significant hit. The English version carries a real premium over the Asian language versions. And I think usually there's like a choice version of a card that people are very excited about. And then reprints start to kind of all feel somewhat similar. So we'll see. I think this card, obviously, don't leave it on the table when you're done drafting, even though it's an uncommon. It's going to be worth something. And depending on the size of the print run, I could see this being anywhere in between $3 or even like $10. But I can't wait to see how that shakes out. Just it's an experiment. It's not going to ruin the game. People that are upset about reprints, it's like, I get it. But like, it is also useful. If you're against reprints, it is useful for them to do reprints every once in a while so we can get better data. Like if you have a concern about the structure and the presence of reprints in their policy and how that's going to work and what it looks like for them to get reprint equity, getting better data is just better, period, if you're looking to understand the truth. So this is, I think, fascinating because we're going to learn something from this. We just saw with Grim Tutor. That was a very interesting reprint. And I think, a year from now, is probably, I would say, when Core 2021 is out of print, that will be the time to take a look and see how the Grim Tutor experiment went. And 3 visits, I think it's going to be interesting to look in the short term, and then also in a little bit longer term, and let's see what happens to the prices of these cards. That's the nice thing about this is, you know what, you actually get to look at the data after. You don't get any points for being right now. Like, you can just take a look later and see what's going on. Reliquary Tower, they've been reprinting this card like crazy. Still got some value to it. And here's a nice new version of that. We have some Disciple of Crufix. It can tap to add a colorless for each card you've drawn this term. It also has Partner, so a 2-color partner here. I mean, if you have two-color partners with no overlap, being able to play 4 colors in this is going to be very interesting. And this one's pretty abusable. I mean, you're going to be able to generate massive amounts of colorless mana in certain types of combo decks with this. Probably not going to pull that off in Limited, but I think originally, I feel like this card, I don't know if it was $10, but I mean, it was at least like $5 from the Commander 2016. Kitesail Corsair, a 2-mana, 2/1, and it has flying as long as it's attacking. I love this type of card for regular Limited, being really aggressive, having evasion, great mana cost versus its power. Toughness is a little weak, but the card can't be just like pure perfection. I think this card's great when you're doing 1v1. We'll see how this plays out for Commander games. Really unclear to me what the best strategies are going to be. When Conspiracy 2 happened, the original Conspiracy. I did a lot of the original Conspiracy, and I'm not going to lie, when you sit down at a 4-person table, I'll do a video about it, but basically, I just offered to split with the person, be like, hey, do you want to team up? Like, we can team up and we can split, or we can team up and we can be the last 2 standing and then we can duke it out, but let's beat these other 2 guys. And that's pretty much the best strategy for a 4-player table, so we'll see how that plays. I don't know how this is all going to sort out. I'll do another video on the politics of multiplayer as it pertains to like tournament settings. We've got a Kitesail Skirmisher here, 4 casting costs, 3/1 with Encore, and whenever it attacks another target creature attacking the same player or planeswalker this turn gains flying until end of turn. So kind of an unexciting Encore, but it does dole out a bunch of damage, and it's not expensive to make happen. Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. Oh, that does not sound like a fantasy name to me. Malcolm, it just kind of pivots into Keen-Eyed Navigator there. He's a Siren Pirate and a flying 2/2 with Partner. So again, you can tack this on to your commanders. Whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So this kind of incentivizes splitting up and attacking multiple people, getting a bunch of treasure, and, you know, is a flavor win. I would say it does kind of feel like exploring instead of just like focused over here. You're kind of going everywhere all around the table and getting some treasure for your trouble. Merchant Raiders, 4 casting costs, 2/4 human pirate. Whenever it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, you can tap up to 1 creature, and that creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Merchant Raiders. Holy crap, that is a really good uncommon. You're going to tap something down and it doesn't untap? And then that happens for every pirate? Wow. Whew, that is a rough one. That's gonna win some games. It's got a big backside. Like, yikes. That is a magic card right there, ladies and gentlemen. Vampiric Tutor, we already covered, and we're back around to Sphinx of the Sun. So that is it for this. We've got Wednesday's spoilers. I'll be doing a video about the dynamics of multiplayer in a kind of tournament setting. We've got a whole lot coming up. Thanks for watching, guys.